Hello, this is Mike Fontopoulos. I'm the academic coach for Springdale Public Schools, and today I want to chat with you about answering the LEQ from your mock exam. More specifically, the number 3 one. This is the one regarding um, the systems of labor in America that are coming here because of the climate exchange. And so that's the one that we're going to do now. This is the second one that the vast majority of the students answered number 2. And then the remaining ones answered number 3. Very few answered the first one. So that's why I'm kind of picking on these two here to talk about. So this is the second one the second video that we're doing. And this is the number 3 prompt. And so let's get right into it. First things first, go to the rubric. The rubric can always be found online. Just simply go to apcentral.collegeboard.org, and then you can find anything you need to find. There, more than ever before, no one's playing any secrets of, I've got a secret or anything like that. Playing hide and go seek. It's all out there, so we should all know how we're going to be scored and what we're going to be scored against, etc. So there's your point for a thesis, point for context, up to 2 points for evidence, and then up to 2 more points for analysis and reasoning. And again, from a very general perspective, you want something that you can claim, a definitive claim. That's your first point for your thesis. 1 point for context. How does this fit into the overall scheme of what's going on in history? Why is this question being asked? 2 points for evidence. I like to think of this: have you got 2 ideas that support this thesis? And then 2 more points for analysis and reasoning. And again, real simple, just to simplify it. You can get into the legalese of these rubrics, but quite frankly, it's do you have because sentences? And as my grandma would say, why for, how comes? If you can't answer why for, and how comes, then maybe you're not going to get those analysis and reasoning points. So again, I don't mean to sound too simple, but again, when you're dealing with a timed exam, you basically, want those points of emphasis and then the because behind it. So that's what gives you more and more of those points right there. What we would call making it sizzle. So let's get to the question. In the period 1500 to 1750, which is again that same time period was the last one, Europeans established colonial empires that transformed the global economy and the economy of the Americas. So when you're talking about Europeans, colonial empires, Americas, you're going all the way down the coastline. That is to say, the British colonies and the Dutch, all the way down to the Portuguese and the Spanish in Latin America. So you can continuously pick out and pick on any of those that they're talking about. So that's a big swath of land and a big hunk of time, which is again kind of the joy and the enemy of world history. It's always going to be a big landscape to paint from and to write from. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which colonial economies in the Americas in this period relied on the introduction of a new system of labor or new systems of labor. So you're looking at the word relied on the introduction of new systems of labor. Okay. So again, things that immediately, if I'm a student, I'm going to start to brainstorm those new systems of labor that weren't here before, that now we've got to have in order for an economic system to take place. And we're talking about mercantilism. Obviously, we're talking about mercantilism kind of transitioning over into capitalism as you move into the late 1700s there, if you want to get into that. But again, they're relying on the introduction of a new system of labor. And again, this is where kids need to understand that there's different styles of labor that are out there on planet Earth. We don't simply just go up to McDonald's and get a job and get paid. This free economy labor system that we have today is a little different than the way things got done back in the day. So again, a lot of kids know this, and great world history teachers are teaching this, and so kids should know this. Immediately, I start thinking about forced labor, and then I start thinking about slavery, and then I start thinking about contractual labor, and then I start thinking about indentured servants. And again, it kind of goes this way in time. The first thing they did is they forced labor. They forced Native Americans down into those silver mines. And then when those are starting to go away, and when they use Native Americans on plantations, the labor is so deadly that they've got to go towards another labor source, which had been in use forever and ever in Africa. Here comes the African slave. So if you just kind of go in your mind, the kind of the history of the Americas and how things are getting done, the first thing they did is they forced Native Americans against their will. And then here comes slave labor to replace all those dying Native Americans. And then finally, here comes I guess you could say, the conscious of the European. And so we're going to get into contractual labor. Maybe that was led by the missionaries and the reports back to the throne on just how negative some of these, how terrible uh, these labor events were. And so here you get into contractual labor. This is where you get into the META systems and the encomienda systems. And then finally, you get indentured servants. In order to get um, Europeans to come to America, they had to sign those indentured servitude moments. So you can get into that too. Um, and so there's four good moments. A lot of students will come up with slavery, and a few others will come up with forced labor. Um, you know, and then some will come up with the encomiendas and the mita system used in Peru and things of that nature. I didn't see a whole lot of kids talking about indentured servants coming from Europe, from the Europeans gathering up their own. This is mainly British, of course, and of course you've got Germans, um, you got anyway. So you want to stop it there at 1750. So you're thinking of Jamestown. You're thinking those New England colonies up there that are the indentured servants trying to buy themselves out of indentured servitude. So again, that's my brainstorming moment. There's my, before I write and click that pen and just start writing, I want to stop what I'm doing and I want to think about what the question's asking. Colonial empires in the Americas relied on the introduction of new systems of labor. All of them are coercive. None of these are going to be fun, right? We know that. There's a good word, coercive labor systems. The world's known these, and probably the Native Americans were doing this to themselves, and they were in the contractual labor when you get into the Mita system that the Incas were doing to one another in order to build bridges and things of that nature. They would make people work a month out of the year, etc., to get their bridge or to get a road under construction or keep it, you know. Then the Spanish would come in and just tap into that. So, anyway, so there you go. This is a good little place to start, and you can see kind of how your essay is going to start to get created. First things first, we got to write the thesis. So I go back, I grab a hunk of the uh, of the question or this what they're wanting me to do. Um, Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which colonial economies in the Americas. Okay, let's get rid of that. Let's capitalize that. Colonial economies in the Americas from 1500 to 1750 relied on the introduction of new systems of labor or labor systems, however you want to say that. And by the way, this is a very common. If you haven't caught on, if you're new to AP World History, the way work gets done. I know it sounds kind of odd, but it's a very unique moment in world history, and it is if you go back to your Acorn Guide to your course to your Bible, if you will, you'll see systems of labor systems all throughout world history. It's a huge economic point for these folks, and so they're always going to ask these types of questions from an economic perspective. Relied on the introduction of new systems of labor, such as, and I'll pick two, such as coercive labor, like um, forced labor and slave labor, which led, and since I know it, which led to contractual labor. Contractual labor. That is to say, labor that is going to be dealt with contracts. And so there you go. That's a good little thesis statement. Um, Again, some students might have said something like relied on the introduction of slave labor and just left it at that. Um, okay, that's a thesis and that's defensible, and you've got yourself a thesis statement, but you've kind of limited yourself to just one topic. There's more than just one way uh, to have a labor system in this new world. Or some people would say, some students said, relied on um, terrible labor or harsh labor or things of this nature. And that starts to get into the world of just vagueness, and it gets into the world of uh, just too general. Again, go back and use the things that you brainstormed about and put that in your thesis, and then you're going to be that much more successful. Again, you're not really um, parting with any type of analysis, because I think a lot of students are really worried about double dipping and getting caught double dipping, and they're like, well, I can't say this again. But what you're going to do in the body of your essays is explain these things, and that's really going to help your essay, and that's going to be where you get your other points. So here you're just trying to collect that first point. So again, tell your reader what it is you're going to defend, your defensible claim, and make it something that you can now put on an outline of some sort. And then the next one is the context. You want to get into that contextualization. Why is this question being asked? What led to this? Um, and so again, we're kind of coming into a new realm, are we not? We're getting into something we haven't seen before. We're coming out of the dark ages, and we're getting into this world where we're going to find a way to make money like never before. We're going to start producing tremendous amounts of sugar. We're going to see these caves full of silver, these silver mines, and that's got to get extracted. The folks that are doing this stuff are conquistadors. They don't know how to do this work. They got an idea, but they can't perform it themselves. So they're going to have to force those that they come into contact with against their will, or they're going to recruit it once they ruin that first population, which are the Native Americans. And so, again, let's see here. To put this time period of labor into context, and again, I use that word context because now I'm telling my reader, me, or whoever it is that's reading this in Kansas City, or whoever's reading this in their home as they read it virtually in the future. Now they're seeing the word context, and the student is kind of rubbing the reader's nose into this. And what I mean by that is they want you to use contextualization, so use the word. It makes that much, it makes so much sense. So there you go. To put this time period of labor into context, many Europeans are beginning to explore the world, and those explorers are conquistadors who are not equipped to perform labor, nor do they have a surplus of labor with them when they originally come to the Americas. Therefore, they must rely on native populations too, and then you can finish the rest of it. There's the story of Hernan Cortez who comes into the Aztec world, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, his men are kind of marching up the hills to get uh, into the central part of Mexico. And as they do, they look behind them, and Hernan Cortez had burned all the ships. And so now they're looking back there and they're seeing a total motivation of we got to there's no going back, and when we get ready to go back, it's going to be a while from now until more ships come here to get us. So they're more motivated than ever, and then they just plugged into the folks around them. They had the Aztecs' enemies help them defeat the Aztecs, along with, of course, their diseases and things of that nature, and their guns, their germs, their steel. But anyway, I'm saying that they these conquistadors come there with nothing other than just guns and germs. And again, somebody's got to perform this work, and they're going to get them to do that. The Native Americans. When those natives die out, let's bring in the next population, and that would be the African slave, who had proved to the Portuguese up and down the coastline that that's an effective form of labor in the sense of a surplus. So again, however much you want to get into that, that's putting this into context. That's where this is coming from. And then you can get into your sentences, and again, now you can get into I like these F words: first, furthermore, finally. Boy, they really help to kind of make your essay pop. I didn't mention those earlier, but if you can get into that business, that's really good. If you can transition from this big paragraph here, because that's what I would try to do, combine that paragraph. Then when you get into paragraph two, which is what this really should be, when you get into paragraph two, um, first, Europeans relied early on some sort of forced labor. Furthermore, and then get into the whole why and all the, as grandma would say, the how comes and the why fors. And then furthermore, later on, they would rely on slavery. Again, get into that. Where'd they learn that? Where'd that come from? And then finally, after native or after missionaries reported back, and maybe after businessmen start telling on each other back to the crown, we've got to get a little more, if you will, civilized. And so let's bring in these contractual labor. Let's bring in the MITA system, and let's revamp that. Here comes the encomienda systems, where we're going to let our European populations in Europe now, through this encomienda labor agreement, um, now they can go out and get the forced labor of the Native American onto their land, or whatever. You can get into the whole idea of how the Native Americans not suited for that type of labor. They've never done that kind of labor before, which is the sugar plantation business, which is going to be all over Latin America. Here comes Brazil. Here comes the Caribbean, and it's a very dangerous labor system. How they're going to die in a year's time anyway, and so we're just going to have to keep replenishing those those systems of labor. Again, you can get into all of that, and that's when you can get into all that into the slave talk of the 12 million that's going to come to the New World. About 8 million are going to go to Brazil, and about another 2 or 3 million are going to wind up in the Caribbean. And then you got another million that's going to go up into North America for cotton and for tobacco originally, and then later on a little. And here comes the tobacco world. So anyway, that's just out of the time frame, but you get my point. So now you can see how your essay starts to sizzle, and you can kind of format it um, in that regard. So there you go. Again, remember the question. It's kind of if you haven't if students haven't heard the term systems of labor or labor systems, they might shy away from this one. But if you've been a teacher that have talked about the way people get work done from the world of Asia, in India, um, in the Middle East, again, all throughout Africa, a lot of it, of course, you're going to, it's going to be slave labor. And then you find out that pretty soon you got a population that you're going to have to rule better than that. And here comes those contracts, if you will, and this will all give way later on to a free market. Um, so as much as you can have a free market with government regulations and things of that nature. But anyway, that's another story for another day. Anyway, so I hope this helps. I hope you've got an idea now of what would be a good thesis and a good, moment of context, and then how the essay may look after that. And if you have any questions, please, you can always reach out to me. Uh, my name is Mike Fotenopoulos, and I've done this. This is my email. And you can reach out to me and I'll answer any of your questions that you may have in the future. And until then, we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.